There is so many brilliant discussions happening, and as we pointed out in the show, from the very beginning, there has been a divide in the scientific community. Now, most of us only heard from Tony Fauci, only heard from Deborah Birx, an American, only heard from the WHO, and somewhere Bill Gates was suddenly a genius when it came to infectious disease and upper respiratory illnesses, even though he himself was really always more focused on computers and even there had trouble ever getting a virus out of the one product he knew something about. But now we are seeing a real battle starting to take place around the world, and it's being caused by something that we presented over the last couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago, the Great Barrington Declaration. Now, this is a brilliant document that, really comes from the space the Highwire has been discussing from the beginning, talking about focused protection. Can't we focus protection the way Sweden did on the elderly, those that, have other comorbidities like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, while those that are healthy get out, let's save the economy. Look at the signatures. Since we've told you to sign up to this, we now have 30,597 medical practitioners, nearly 11,000 medical and public health scientists have signed on. So we're reaching 40,000 medical people, 560,000 concerned citizens. If you have not signed the Great Barrington Declaration, I would recommend that you do. I believe this will be a historic document that we will look back on and say, this divide, how did we get it wrong when so many had it right? These are the authors, Dr. Martin Kulldorff, Dr. Sunetra Gupta, and Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. Now, we talked about the fact that these three met at the White House, sat down with Alex Azar, and made the rounds here in America promoting the Great Barrington Declaration. Many have been challenging this, but what's at the heart of it? What's at the heart of it is the concept of herd immunity. This is one of the authors describing herd immunity that some are trying to say is a terrible strategy. Listen to what Dr. Bhattacharya has to say about that. Take a look.
Herd immunity is not a strategy. Herd immunity is a fact about most infectious diseases, the course that they spread through the population. Even if we were to have an effective vaccine, we would be relying on herd immunity as the endpoint of this infectious disease epidemic. So it's less of a strategy than a recognition of a biological fact.
A biological fact, and you would think that would be shared across science, and it's been really disturbing watching what's taken place over the last 2 weeks since this discussion. There is what I would like to describe as true science denial taking place at the highest levels. Herd immunity is a concept that we have known. This is the known science of infectious disease, yet you would be shocked to find that or hear that when you listen to now the head of the WHO, Tedros Ghebreyesus, is the Director General of the World Health Organization. He lashed out at the concept that we could allow herd immunity to take place. Listen to this.
There has been some discussion recently about the concept of reaching so-called herd immunity by letting the virus spread. Herd immunity is a concept used for vaccination, in which a population can be protected from a certain virus if a threshold of vaccination is reached. For example, herd immunity against measles requires about 95% of a population to be vaccinated. The remaining 5% will be protected by the fact that measles will not spread among those who are vaccinated. For polio, the threshold is about 80%. In other words, herd immunity is achieved by protecting people from a virus, not by exposing them to it. Never in the history of public health has herd immunity been used as a strategy for responding to an outbreak, let alone a pandemic. It's scientifically and ethically problematic.
Absolutely shocking that we are watching an absolute rewrite of history. Herd immunity has never been used when it comes to an outbreak or infectious disease. Really? What was it we used during the MERS outbreak and the SARS outbreak and the Hong Kong flu? In fact, every coronavirus, every flu virus, every rhinovirus over the years, what exactly has kept it from sweeping the world and knocking us all out? Other than herd immunity, Tedros. Herd immunity is what we've always used. In fact, it is the standard protocol for the entire world. Only this year did people like you and the WHO decide, let's try something brand new. Let's fight herd immunity. Let's hide from this virus. That's it. Let's lock down. Let's bubble wrap everybody, keep them in their basements, and see if a virus will just go away. It's been a complete and total failure. But now, in the midst of this failure, where the only thing we have actually achieved, as far as I can tell, is we have kept a coronavirus alive longer than any coronavirus in history, where normally we would hit that threshold, we've all become immune to the whatever that common cold was of the year. Remember, there's a season to things. Why is there an end to the season? Because the virus has burnt itself out. What does that burnt it out mean? Herd immunity has been achieved. Only now we're doing this all brand new. We're going to rewrite the history of science and medicine, and Tedros isn't alone. Listen to Matt Hancock, one of the geniuses running the, I guess, the new lockdowns in England. Take a listen to what he has to say.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this pandemic remains a formidable threat. Our strategy is to suppress the virus, supporting the economy, education, and the NHS until a vaccine makes us safe. Some people have set out this more relaxed approach, including in the so-called Great Barrington Declaration. And I want to take this argument head on, because on the substance, the Great Barrington Declaration is underpinned by two central claims, and both are emphatically false. First, it says that if enough people get COVID, we will reach herd immunity. This is not true. Many infectious diseases never reach herd immunity, like measles and malaria and AIDS and flu. And with increasing evidence of reinfection, we should have no confidence that we would ever reach herd immunity to COVID, even if everyone caught it. Herd immunity is a flawed goal without a vaccine, even if we could get to it, which we can't.
It's amazing to listen to these talking heads that actually they're not doctors. Matt Hancock is not a doctor. My understanding is prior to being in charge of the future of the UK's health, that he was really just the Minister or Commissioner of Sports and Culture. And Tedros also is not a doctor. He has some really dodgy past working for the Ethiopian government, some issues covering up a potential cholera outbreak there. I'm not going to get deep into those things, but these are not doctors. They're saying, you know, Dr. Gupta and Dr. Bhattacharya don't know what they're talking about. Really? That's fascinating. I mean, look at the credits of Dr. Sunetra Gupta, professor at Oxford University, epidemiologist, expertise in immunology, vaccine development, and mathematical modeling of infectious diseases. I think she knows what she's talking about. Martin Koldorf, professor of medicine at Harvard University, a biostatistician and epidemiologist with expertise in detecting and monitoring of infectious disease outbreaks and vaccine safety evaluations. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, professor at Stanford University Medical School, a physician, epidemiologist, health economist, and public health policy expert focusing on infectious diseases and vulnerable populations. But no, for all these, let's go with the Commissioner on Sports and Culture to get our advice and the future of this planet. It's amazing. But I want to take what Matt Hancock said there, that there is no herd immunity for things like measles and the flu and AIDS and things like that. Matt, the entire concept of herd immunity comes from natural measles infection. I mean, you literally called out the entire term herd immunity comes from natural measles infection. In fact, it goes back to 1923. Monthly estimates of the child population susceptible to measles, 1900 to 1931, Baltimore, Maryland, by A.W. Hedrick. This is it. This is a study in September 27th, 1932. It's the first discussion of herd immunity, and I'll just give you the bullet points. Essentially, here it is. The term is introduced in 1923 by epidemiologist Hedrick, first recognized as a naturally occurring underlying phenomenon. What Hedrick found and published was his research showing that the declines in measles epidemics in Baltimore when 55% of the population under 15 years of age had developed immunity from natural infection. That is the case. That is the case. That's how we know about herd immunity because, and then when they looked at other places, there were other studies that showed that especially measles, that was very infectious, when it would sweep through an area, it would disappear. Now look at this. When we talk about vaccinations is how we've achieved herd immunity, not so. This is the United States mortality map. Look at where these vaccines came in compared to the illness. When you look at diphtheria, in 1920, we introduced the vaccine. It's already crashing down. Whooping cough vaccine in the late 1940s, whooping cough at that point was almost non-existent as far as being deadly. Remember, was the illness deadly? And that's why we would ever make a vaccine, because we want you priming your immune system. And look at the measles vaccine. I mean, I've said this before. This sucker comes along in 1963. Measles used to be deadly. I mean, look way back at that list. I mean, it was very dangerous, and there was a reason to be afraid of it. But naturally, through what? Through natural herd immunity, it basically wiped itself out and certainly wiped out its ability to cause death. And as I've said before, if you look at the CDC stats, the death rate of measles in America was 1 in 500,000 by 1961-62, before the vaccine ever came along. Folks, they are rewriting the science. They are rewriting history. And in fact, you know, Dr. Gupta did not take this sitting down. She wrote an entire article attacking Matt Hancock is wrong about herd immunity. Confusion about the COVID-19 science is hampering the debate and costing lives. She goes on to say, like HIV, this is what he brought up, influenza also has the ability to change its outfit, and periodically a new strain emerges requiring a new vaccine. It is because sufficient immunity accumulates in the population that a radical change of outfit becomes worthwhile. What Mr. Hancock means when he says we do not reach herd immunity to flu is that it finds a way around it. It is unlikely, given the nature of coronaviruses, that the SARS-CoV-2 virus would be capable of doing the same thing. In a nutshell, the development of immunity through natural infection is a common feature of many pathogens, and it is reasonable to assume that COVID-19 does not have any tricks up its sleeve to prevent this from happening. It would pose a very serious problem for the development of a vaccine if it did. I mean, this is the problem. They are trying to tell us that you don't get long-term immunity. And Matt Hancock even points out to where we've got to look at the rising cases of reinfection. It's like 5 people. 5 people in the entire world have some crazy immune system that just didn't work right. I mean, surprise, surprise, not all bodies are the same, but 5 people in a world of 7.5 billion people and millions of infections, we're going to point to those 5 that got the illness again? Come on. That's absolutely insane cherry picking to forward what is clearly an agenda to destroy our historical understanding of infectious disease. Dr. Gupta is not alone. Dr. Christina Stabile-Bend put out a tweet, and she makes the point too. Look at people, puzzled people who judge it unethical to contemplate herd immunity from natural infection argue it's uncertain how long immunity lasts. But natural immunity is probably better than vaccine immunity only because it always has been, and there's never been a case where that wasn't the case. If natural immunity doesn't last, then vaccines won't work either. What then? I mean, that is the point, right? You can't argue this both ways. You either believe in herd immunity or you don't. You can't say there's only vaccine herd immunity. Not true. In fact, the strongest herd, this most powerful part of the herd is always those that have lifelong immunity from having had the illness. And it's why, if you've been watching the show, we discuss measles a lot. They are having a serious problem with measles outbreaks because half of the people that are getting the measles already had the vaccinations. It's worn off. It's wearing off in the adults. And this is a brand new phenomenon in this world because what you have to understand is their new version of a herd immunity, which is based on vaccination, was relying on the actual herd immunity of all of those who had had the illness. You see, when we finally started vaccinating for the measles, we thought, well, look, all you have to do is vaccinate those, 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds, and we're good to go. You're good to go because everybody else had lifelong immunity back in the 1960s. Everyone had already had it, so you're like, woohoo, we achieved herd immunity. But slowly, as time goes on, we keep vaccinating, and those that have lifelong herd immunity have been dying off. And now what we're seeing is really the last generation of true herd immunity is the baby boomers in America, what was the largest population until recently in America. They are the last harbingers of true herd immunity. They are the sentinels holding up herd immunity. When they go away, the World Health Organization knows they've totally screwed up because there's no foundation of herd immunity left. Now we've got to start vaccinating everybody over and over and over and over and over again because the vaccines are wearing off. And all the science shows that the vaccines keep wearing off faster and faster. The more you give a vaccine, the less and less effective it is. And now they are in a chase. They are chasing their own tails, and they're trying to change the science around this. They are rewriting the science to make you believe that herd immunity was always based on vaccinations. No. The only thing vaccinations have actually achieved is they've wiped out true herd immunity and replaced it with temporary, inferior immunity that has to be vaccinated over and over and over again. And just to see that this is an agenda that is not just being played out by world leaders, but also by news anchors and those that are owned by the pharmaceutical industry, take a look at this attack on herd immunity during a town hall with Donald Trump.
10% of the country approximately has had COVID. That means 80, 90%, 90%, let's do the math, is still vulnerable.
Right.
There's been some talk, including from the White House lately, that perhaps it approves of what's called herd immunity. That's where you basically just let young people and everybody get sick. You try to protect the old people and those who are sick, and hopefully it gets up to a certain level, and now we're all immune. Yeah. So let's just be clear about it. It also means more deaths. Do you support herd immunity as a strategy? Essentially just let people get sick.
The cure cannot be worse than the problem itself. We did the right thing. We were expected to lose 2,200,000 people and maybe more than that. We're at 210,000 people. One person is too much. It should have never happened because of China. It happened because of China. And you have to get that and understand that. But it shouldn't have happened. But we were expected to lose. If you look at the original charts from original doctors who are respected by everybody, 2,200,000
That 2 million figure, though, is if you literally did nothing.
People.
The 2 million figure is if you did absolutely nothing, it would be 2 million. The question is, should the deaths be better than 200,000 when relative to the rest of the world we have a worse death rate?
The fact is, the cure, you can't let this continue to go on with the lockdowns.
Well,
and I believe that on November 4th, you're going to have a lot of these governors. Look at what's happening to New York. New York is a mess. They lost almost 40,000 people. They have a lockdown like you've never seen. Now they're open. It's like a ghost town.
Let's get Sam.
And Savannah, it's very important. People are leaving New York by the thousands. And you're going to have a hard time ever building it up again. So that cure, that so-called cure that you talk about, it can't be worse than the problem. The problem is a bad problem.
A fascinating discussion. I am not here to choose sides. What we are laying out is what the President of the United States of America is saying about this issue in a debate. And I want to say that when we look at what's being said there, first of all, there's a real misnomer when she says that only 10% are affected, so now 90% have got to still get the illness. We have shown you time and time again. I don't know why CNN or MSNBC or many of these news agencies are missing the science happening around the world, but here it is. Here's the reality. SARS-CoV-2 T-cell epitopes define heterologous and COVID-19 induced T-cell recognition. This is what we've talked about. Cross-reactive SARS-CoV T-cells epitopes revealed pre-existing T-cell responses in 81% of unexposed individuals and validation of similarity similarity to common cold human coronaviruses, provided a functional basis for postulated heterologic immunity in SARS-CoV-2 infection. I know those are a lot of big words, but let me try and simplify this for you. This was not a novel coronavirus in that our bodies did not recognize it at all. As it turns out, for about 81% of us, let's be really conservative, some of the studies show that it's about 60% of us, we already have immunity because we had a coronavirus last year. This is how herd immunity works. And for those that didn't have it last year or the last several years, they're going to have to get it. Somewhere around 20% of us, maybe as high as 40% of us, but certainly not 90 to 100% of us. And for most of us, 80 to 90%, we won't even have symptoms because our bodies are doing such a good job of fighting this off. So she's absolutely wrong about this, and it's how they're trying to scare us. My God, how far we've got to go to get to herd immunity? Not true. And by the way, if you can't achieve herd immunity by getting the illness, how will the vaccine ever work? And by the way, if you tend to put $1 billion into a vaccine that in the monkey trial didn't stop transmission at all, then you got to wonder how the vaccine is going to do anything whatsoever. But I want to make a point here because, you know, I imagine Donald Trump will bring it up today, but he's right about New York. You see, the United States of America is being sort of dragged through the mud over our death rate from COVID-19. And it's not necessarily because there's 200,000 deaths. It's the deaths per million, right? That's what you're really arguing. You can't compare America to Sweden or Ecuador. We are a far larger nation. But when we looked up where we really had the biggest problems, New York is at the top of the list. When you look at deaths per million, it's, New Jersey's at 1,843, New York's at 1,723, Massachusetts at 1,419, Connecticut at 1,281. Those are all, I hate to say it, these are states run by Democrats. And so to try and make this a political issue, it doesn't make sense that it's a political issue. And it certainly can't be hung around Donald Trump's neck when you have Cuomo making decisions like, let me pass a law that forces infected people have to be accepted in nursing homes. That's what shot the death rate up through the roof. And I'd really be curious what our parts per million or our deaths per million is when we take out those Democratic states that made serious errors in how they handled this. I'm not here to make any other arguments except for the fact that we are not having the full discussion. And so tonight, I hope on this debate that we talk to Joe Biden and we ask, the Democratic Party is really the only states that forced fully infected people into nursing homes. Do you agree with that policy? Do you have some problems with that policy? And when we're deciding, whether or not we're going to mask down or lock down, what are we locking down for? I really wish Joe Biden could be asked this question. What is the end goal? What is the end point of this lockdown? What are we locking down until the virus gives us a call and says, hey, you know what? I packed up my bags. I'm going home. I'm going back to my planet, or whatever it is they're dreaming is going to happen. It's not going anywhere. At some point, you're going to have to get to herd immunity. And so the next question should be for both presidents. It doesn't look like any of these vaccines are stopping transmission. If it cannot stop transmission, does it make any sense to lock down, destroy our economy, waiting for this vaccine unicorn to show up and arrive when it is not going to be able to save us? If it can't get us out of masks and can't get us out of lockdown, why are we locked down to begin with? Are we locked down till the end of time? I would like for, Joe Biden, I suppose, to answer, if we do lock down again, when would be too long for you? 2 years? 3 years? We're still waiting for a vaccine. It still seems to be flailing, and we keep investing in losers. At what point do you say, you know what? I think about it like being in a bunker, right? You think about the movies of an Armageddon, maybe nuclear fallout. At a certain point, when you're running out of oxygen in your bunker, and you get the message that, the savior that was coming to save you just died on the battlefield, or there is nothing coming, you eventually have to come out of that bunker and say, you know what, we've got to deal with the world as it is. When do we deal with the world as it is? I think there's a lot of fairy tales going on here and a lot of lies about herd immunity. And I don't think anyone addressed it better than the White House's own Scott Atlas. Look at this.
population immunity is a biological phenomenon that occurs. It's sort of like, if you're building something in your basement, it's down on the ground because gravity puts it there. It's simply, it's not a strategy to say that herd immunity exists. Herd immunity is obtained when a certain percentage of the population becomes resistant or immune to an infection, whether that is by getting infected or getting a vaccine or a combination of both. In fact, if you don't believe that herd immunity exists as a pathway to block, as a way to block the pathways to the vulnerable in an infection, then you would never really advocate or believe in giving widespread vaccination. That's the whole point of it.
Another lauded doctor, medical expert that is trying to remind everybody herd immunity is as sound as the concept of gravity itself. When you're working your basement, whatever you're working on doesn't float up to the roof for one reason. Gravity exists. Let us not let them, the anti-science deniers of the WHO and those leading the UK, let's not allow them to rewrite scientific facts. If you like that clip, then be sure to check out our live broadcast of The High Wire every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. You can watch it on Facebook, iTunes, and Twitter. We'll see you there.